So I have a Node.js backend project for a login system, which is based on Express and uses MongoDB as the database. It works fine and supports sign up, sign in, among other useful functionalities. But the majority of the code is in a single API file, which makes it difficult to manage. So in this video, our mission is to transform our code, which is looking like this, to something that will be easier to manage. We built this project together on the channel, and I'll link to it in the description and at the end of the video. I'll start by cleaning up the sign up route. This can be found in the user API file. So the first thing I will do is to create a source directory. I want to organize all the source code in this directory. In this directory, I'll create a domains directory. The domains will be the individual features of the project. So in the domains directory, I'll create a user directory. In this directory, I'll first set up the model for the user, and I'll get the content from the user file under models. Right after that, I'll create a route file, and in the file, I'll bring in the express router from the user API file. Now I'll bring in the sign up route from the user file. To make it cleaner, we'll change how we handle the promises. So first, we'll make the router handler function and a sync function. In this function, we'll wrap everything in a try-catch block. I'll maintain how I destructured the request data. Now for the validation, I'll change how the errors are handled. Instead of returning the JSON object, I'll pick the message and pass it to an error object, which I'll then throw. And I'll do the same for all the other messages. Now after the verification, we make use of the user model to check if the user already exists. Otherwise, we go ahead to create a new user record. But for now, I don't want to do this in the same file, since we can extract this into a function. So still in the user directory, I'll create another file and call it controller. In this file, I'll first bring in the user model, and I'll create a function for creating a new user. This should be an async function, and it will expect a data argument. In the function, we'll open a try-catch block. Now in the sign up route, we'll cut all the content in the else block, and then we'll paste it in the controller. Now first add a line of code to destructure our credentials from the data parameter, and then move on to check if the user already exists. For this request, I'll assign it to a variable, and make use of the await keyword, so that there will be no need for .then.catch. Now after this, I'll modify the checking of the result length by using the existing user variable. Now just like we did earlier, I'll throw an error object based on the message. Now if that is not the case, we see that we hash the user password using bcrypt. Now the hashing is something we'll be doing quite often. For example, it is being used in the email verification section. So once again, we can extract this into another function. So to make this manageable, I'll create a utilities folder under the source directory. In this directory, I'll create a file for hashing data. In this file, we'll bring in bcrypt and I'll create a hash data function. We'll make this an async function and I'll open a try-catch block in it. I'll copy the first part of the hashing and paste it in it. The function will take a data and a sort round argument. The data will be what we want to hash, and the sort rounds is something bcrypt expects, and we'll give it an initial value of 10. Now to the hash function, we'll change the password to data, and we'll assign it to a hash data variable, and we'll make use of the await keyword. After that, we can return the hash data, and in the error section, we'll throw any error that will come up. And we have to ensure that we export the hash data function. Now back in the controller, we bring in the hash data function, and we'll call it with the password using the await keyword, and we'll assign the output, which will be a hashed password, to the variable. After that, we'll create the new user object, and we'll modify the saving to make use of an await, and we'll assign the output to a variable. Right after that, we'll return the variable. Now scanning through the code, we see that after saving the user, we actually send a verification email. Now this has to do with email verification and not just the sign up, so we'll handle that a bit later. Now we can get rid of everything below the return statement, and in the catch block, we'll throw any error that will occur. This will cater for all the error messages that we've cleared. Now back in the user route, we'll bring in the create new user function. We will await this function and pass it an object with the user credentials. We'll store the output of this in a new user variable. Now after this, we want to proceed with the verification email. So back in the big user API file, I have a verification function. So I'll select all of it and cut it. Now the function is for OTP verification, and in my project, it belongs to another domain. So under the domains directory, I'll create one for email verification using OTP. And in this domain, I'll create a controller file. In this file, I'll paste the function we just copied. It's already an async function, and for the parameters, we'll get rid of the response. Now the OTP verification will also need a model. So we'll create a model file and we'll copy the contents from the old model file. Now at the very top of the function, I'm making use of the math class to generate a random OTP. This is something I can extract as well. So under the utilities, I'll create another file for generating OTP. In the file, I'll create an async function with a try-catch block. This function will just return the OTP statement from the controller. In the catch block, we'll throw any error that will occur and we'll export the function. Back in the controller, we can import it and use it, making use of the await keyword here. Now after the mail options object, we see that we are hashing some data, and we've already created a function for hashing, so we import that to be used. All we need to do is to pass the OTP to the function. Right after that, we'll create an OTP verification record and save it, and we'll make use of a transporter to send the email. But in this file, we don't have the transporter here, and sending the email is something we'll be doing quite often. So once again, we'll create a utility for that, and we'll call it send email. In this file, we'll bring in the node mailer setup credentials from the old user API file, and we'll create a send email function. This will be an async function, and inside it, we'll open a try-catch block. As a parameter, it will expect the mail options. So we'll copy the transporter statement and paste it here. This will return a status which will store as email sent, and we'll return it. In the catch block, we will throw any error that will occur, and we'll make sure to export the send email function. Back in the controller, we import the send email function, and we'll call it by passing the mail options and making sure that we await it. After that, we'll get rid of the JSON response, and we only return the data object. Now in the catch block, we'll throw any error that will occur. At the bottom of this, we'll export an object and add a function to it. Now back in the user route file, we import the verification function, and we'll call it using the new user variable. This will return an object and we'll call it email data. At this point, we'll finally return the JSON object, and the data will be the email data. Also in the try-catch block, we'll return a JSON object. This will have a status of failed and will extract the message from the error. Now this is cleaner because you are returning the objects only once, and it is at the top level. Now for this file, we need to ensure that we export the router. Now to make referring to each domain simpler, we can create an index file in each domain. So in the user directory, I'll create an index file, and in this file, I will expose the route to the server by bringing in the route and exporting it. You know that once we have an index file and we are importing it somewhere, we don't need to specify the name of the actual file. Now for the actual connection to the database, which is sitting in the root config file, I'll move the whole directory to the source directory. Also, I'll move the server file as well and make some changes. In addition to the server file, I'll create an index file in the source directory. We'll make the server configurations in the server file and actually start the server using the index file. So in the server file, I'll get rid of the port and also get rid of the app.listen. Now the user router here is no longer going to work. So to get it to work, in the source directory, we'll create another directory and call it routes. This directory will contain an index file in which we'll declare all the domains in the project and the various endpoints associated with them. For the start, we bring in the user domain, and making use of Express router, we specify that the /user route will refer to routes in the user domain, and after that, we export the router. So back in the server file, we change the import to just route, and we can change the variable name to route as well, and we'll tell the app to make use of the routes. Now I'll move the statements around to make it cleaner, and at the bottom, I'll export the app. So in the index file, I'll bring in the server, and we'll set the port like how it was before. I just copied and pasted, and we'll create a function to start the server. The server will listen to the port and log a message to the console. Right after that, we can call the function to start the server. With the change in structure, how we actually start the server will change. So we need to make a change in the package.json file. For the dev script, my project doesn't start in the server file anymore, but rather the index file under the source directory. Something I can also do regarding the environment variables in the project is to create a directory for it. In this directory, should I have multiple sets of environment variables, I can create a file for each of them. So for my current set, I can call it local.env, and I'll need to copy the content from the current file into this new file, and we can get rid of the old env file. Now for the project to recognize the values, we need to make an addition to the dev script and also make a change in the gitignore file. So in the dev script, we'll make use of an R flag and also .env/config, and at the end, we specify the path to the env file. In the git ignore, we add a statement to target all files ending in .env. Now fingers crossed, we can start this server with no errors, and hopefully the sign-up will work with the new structure. Cool. Now the same strategy will apply to all the other features. So I'll speed through that and show you the outcome. So for the user domain, we got an additional route for signing, and we created a function in the controller for authentication. This made use of the user model to ensure that a user exists. And for verifying the password which has been hashed, we created a function to verify hash data. And that is a utility making use of bcrypt to verify the hash data. In addition to the user domain, we got email verification and forgot password domains. They all had a similar structure, with the route file containing the endpoint for the domain, and the model containing the already existing model, controller containing all the extracted functions, and the index file exposing all the routes in the domain. The only feature which had an extra need was the email verification, which needed the views directory for the static HTML file that it works with. With our current structure, it should be easier to add some new features and locate bugs that may occur. Note that this will change all the API endpoints for the project, so any frontend connected to this will require changes to the API calls for it to function as expected. The full source code resulting from this video will be available to my patrons. You can become one using the link below the like button. In a future video, I'll talk more about the best way of using such a structure to start your Node.js project, whether using JavaScript or TypeScript. Until then, you can check out the full playlist for the project here. Thanks for watching.